and welcome to Mendezville Live with something to talk about. But before we get into the show, I just want to recognize the take some time to acknowledge the tragedy that happened in McAllen, and our thoughts and prayers are with those families. We're all thinking about you, and of course, we know the way things are happening right now with the police enforcement and all those things. Um, our thoughts and prayers. With that being said, today's broadcast is Mendes Sports Training. We take care of training kids in speed and soccer. But today, our main focus is on the opening of schools, reopening at full force at 100%, or virtual learning, distance learning. And of course, I put up a thread earlier stating that teacher salaries might not get paid as much in a point of view. Not that I'm saying I am for it. It was just a point of view that we're going to discuss today in the broadcast. Now, with that being said, there's some things that we have to consider is this podcast today is more about the educators. There are big decisions being made from school board members, which they are the leaders of the community. But I'm taking the time today to where we can make sure, add comments, add ideas from different points. And we're going to go into a thread. We're going to talk about first the virtual learning, because that was a big topic on when I put that thread. I got a bunch of phone calls, and we're going to talk about the reopening. And I am going to bring one of my guests from San Antonio, an administrator and a local from the Valley. He is Jake Solis. He's on muted right now, but I'll bring him in here in a bit. So that's the goal of today. Is we are going to talk about it. Make sure you comment. So all the ideas, everything from all angles, from bus drivers, custodians, the cafeteria people. I mean, everything, all things considered. And we're going to talk about what kind of things we're seeing in San Antonio as well. So one thing, the very first topic we're going to start off with is distance learning. But before I go into that, there's this one point I do want to make. There's teachers out there or educators, when we talk about distance learning and not reopening the schools, are very open about, no, I don't think we should open the school. I don't think we should open the schools. It's dangerous. I want to know what percentage of those are out and about at HEB, are out and about at Home Depot, or out and about just going everywhere, going to the beach. But yet again, when it comes to opening the schools, you don't want to open the schools. I think that's a little hypocritical, but everybody is entitled to their opinion. Go ahead and comment if you think differently. Okay, Jake, welcome to the show. Jake, how are you doing?
Hey, Rudy, how are you doing, man?
Doing all right, man. Tell us, Jake's here from La Jolla. We graduated together. Coyotes 99, right?
Yeah.
You're the Coyote.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. I mean, for people that haven't kept up with you over the course of the past few years, what do you do right now in San Antonio?
Well, currently I work for one of the largest school districts in San Antonio ISD. It's also one of the oldest. I'm an associate principal, so I'm part of the administration team at one of the high schools there.
Have you guys, what as of right now, we all know that COVID exists. And of course, there's two sides. People say it's going to be dangerous. People are getting sick for the kids. I'm talking about the kids. And then there's sides that it's going to be okay, their immune system. We already established that yesterday in the last few. I had some people from China yesterday talking the show. I think we've established that. Now let's talk about COVID exists. Let's not open the schools. What is your school district saying? Are they going to open? Are they going to go virtual? What options are they talking about over there in San Antonio?
So one of the good things about San Antonio ISD is that we have a vast variety of people. We have a large number of minorities. We have upper class. We have lower class. So the people that we serve is very, very diverse. So the conversation started a very long time ago. Now, one of the biggest things that we're trying to work on is finding a way to facilitate a hybrid model where we have about 25% of the student population come in, have in-class or in-person instruction, and then, of course, the other percentage of kids roll in throughout the week. We're still working on a model that best fits our needs, best fits the community's needs. We want to be able to make sure that we still have a high quality education for these students. But we also have to keep in mind, yes, we are institutions of learning, but we're also employers. So not only do we want to keep our clients, which is our students, safe, but we want to make sure that we keep our employees safe as well. So that means making sure that every precaution that we take, also benefits the teachers and the bus drivers and the custodians, so all the people that we employ. So we have to keep that in mind. We're still working hard. We haven't finalized any of our plans. We're contacting computer companies to come up with instructional tools that best help what we have at work right now or in the school district. So we're reaching everywhere. We're reaching everywhere to best fit or at least move forward to best fit all of our needs. And of course, with caution.
Right. So of course, so then with that, all that being said, are you going full force opening, or what are the options for parents
No.
and teachers?
So this is the thing, because all of our students. I'm sorry, say that again.
Yeah. So for parents and teachers, are you reopening? What are the options for a parent to send the kids to school, keep them at home? How are they going to learn? Stuff like that.
Exactly. So we're still focusing on finding models that best fit everyone's needs, and that means different models. Some kids will be at 50% in live instruction, 50% virtual instruction. Some kids will be 100% in virtual instruction. So we're working all these types of models to best fit all of our kids' needs. We don't have the answer yet. We may not even have the best answer until we try it out. And so what we really want to be able to do is minimize exposure. And you talked earlier about, hey, all these teachers are going to Home Depot, they're going to Walmart. But we have to understand that there's a length of exposure as well. Understand that a teacher is going to be at a school for 8 to 10 hours, depending. And we want to be able to make sure that they're safe as well. Same thing with our students. We have one of our options right now is to have teachers rotate as opposed to students. That way, the kids don't interact with other kids. We want to be able to have multiple schedules throughout the day where a certain kid comes in at 9 o'clock, another set of kids come in at 9:30, another set of kids comes in at 10, so that where interactions in between the day are minimized. And that also, of course, our bus drivers will be running buses throughout the day. And of course, they're going to minimize the amount of kids on their buses, on their trips every single time.
Let's touch base on that. I was talking to a teacher, an educator whose dad is a bus driver, and he had mentioned something of that nature of the buses running. Mm-hmm. Now, imagine how much money they're going to waste on fuel for the year. That's a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong, money shouldn't be an issue, but it's something that teachers, parents, and school board members should take a look into. That's going to be a lot of money. Mm-hmm. They have to make that decision. Let's move on to let's talk about just virtual learning. What is a virtual learning classroom going to be? Because here's my background in virtual learning. And of course, people can comment on this. COVID happens in a spring break. We go into March, April, May. And everybody's talking about booklets, pick them up, turn them in. They're talking about Google Classroom or whatever software they were using online. Put up the assignment, do the assignment, and then they come back. And then, to me personally, that system was a decent system for the fact that it was something very new. I'm at home. I'm taking care of 3 toddlers, and not everyone is in the same boat. I'm taking care of 3 toddlers. I felt that's why I made the comment. If we're going to go back to something like that, well, maybe we should decrease the salary because as taxpayers at the same time, of course, let me be clear about this, everyone who got upset at me for that comment. First of all, most politicians are not going to commit political suicide and take salaries away. I think we can all understand that. It was just a point of I should have reworded in the sense of we need to make sure we're being as effective as possible, because a lot of teachers were like, oh, it was so much work. To me, it's never about the teachers. I'm sorry. To me, it's about the kids first, teachers second. If you're working a lot and it's hard work, but the teachers or the students are not learning as much, half of them are not even logging in, or 50% log in, and those 50% are not the same ones. So to me, you're talking about 25 to 30% effectiveness. Then it's a problem, and I knew that it's new territory. But at the same time, we have to speak honestly so we can tackle the problem as best as possible without, let's not share that so the public doesn't know. No, in Mendezville Live, we share so we all know what's the best angle to pursue. So with that being said, salaries will probably not decrease. Let's talk about the virtual learning. In a virtual learning, what I heard from some of the summer school teachers, I didn't do summer school, some of the summer school teachers said, hey, it's a lot of work. I had to teach virtually like we are doing here on a Zoom or Google Meets, and they had to be there. I had to take lunch, and then I had to come back and teach another group, and vice versa. What kind of virtual learning did you guys do in summer school, or is there something similar to what you're hearing from me, or something? Share what you guys go through in San Antonio.
So one of the things that I need to make sure that I mention is that the reason we feel right now, in retrospect, that virtual learning wasn't as effective as we wanted it to be is because we were utilizing platforms that were not meant to be 100% virtual. That's why we're reaching out for these computer companies to create platforms that are going to be a little easier to maneuver, easier for people to log in, easier for us to make sure that there's integrity in the work that they turn in. Because how many people try to turn in their sister's paper or have their sister take a test for them, whatever the case may be.
Right, right.
So all these computer companies are trying to create programs that are going to be effective, not only to ensure that the instruction is quality, but also that there is dignity in the way we assess our students as well. And so that is why, and data is very important. So we're collecting the data from March until the end of the year or even into summer. That data has helped us, guide us, so that way we can start making better decisions. You see, we didn't have any data before March. So people are complaining, well, we did this, and it did not work because we had no data. And we were utilizing platforms that were meant to be intermittent virtual classrooms. Like Google Classroom wasn't meant to be 100% virtual. So that's where, though people might have feelings about the way March to May happened, it was very valuable data that we have acquired and has allowed us to start making better decisions for our communities as well. Yes, we found out the type of kids that do not log in, that don't do their work. How are we going to go ahead and solve those problems? Because I'll tell you one thing, they're not always the same kids. The kids that you expect, the kids who went to school every single day, did all their work, some of those kids were not logging in. So how do we solve those potential problems? Is it an internet issue? Is it technology issue? What is it? Is it a time issue? And so the data that was acquired throughout these past few months about 100% virtual learning has become valuable as we get ready for this coming year.
Let me ask you this, because you're from the area, you came to La Jolla, you know the area. Two things. One is, did you see a big difference in teaching and learning in your summer program compared to the late spring? And the other question is, do you see the same struggle demographically, socioeconomically, compared San Antonio, your area, to the areas we talk about here in the La Jolla ISD school district, the Donna school, people who are not as socioeconomically lucky, I guess, in that sense. For example, that might have access to internet and Wi-Fi and the computers and all these other things.
Well, I think the struggles are very, very similar. People who don't have money are not going to buy what they do not need. I mean, you talk about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're going to feed themselves first. So yes, some of these struggles are very, very similar. Granted, when we talk about demographics, there's an ethnic demographic that may not be as similar because the value populations are significantly different than like inner city schools, and so it's very difficult to compare apples to oranges at this particular point. But I will say that some of the struggles are very, very similar when it comes to these particular demographics or areas.
So how was your summer? How was the summer teaching compared to the spring?
So, and that's traditional, right? We talk about always having an abridged curriculum or bridged programming during the summer, right? Because there's a short amount of time, right? These kids have already failed the course. So we're going to try to make sure that they get only what they need. And that has been traditional education for the past, I don't know how many decades. But that's the way summer schools have always been. It's always about bridging the curriculum, focusing on emphasizing on major skills to ensure that the kid will at least have a chance when they get into the next grade, that before then they didn't have the skills. And unfortunately, that's just the way summer curriculums are designed, and not at all schools, because I've worked at different schools, I've worked in different districts, and there are some people who will take a summer school program and will make the kid come from 8 to 5 every day for a month and a half. where they get the most from the curriculum. And then you have other school districts where like we cannot do that. We don't have the teachers, we don't have the staff, we don't have the money. There's some school districts that charge a tuition for summer school. There's some that don't. So there's so many different factors, and all that ties in also with their ability to tie in the curriculum or abridge the curriculum. I mean, I come from a district where people are hired to do only summer curricula, you know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
at other school districts, it's like the teacher that they hired for the summer, you have to, abridge your own curriculum,
Right.
So it really does depend.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's so many different factors that are involved when it comes to creating and implementing a summer curriculum.
Right. So moving forward to the new school year, when we reopen for the virtual stuff, the distance learning, what should teachers expect their day is going to look like if they stay home? I know personally, I'm ready to go. If they would ask me, I'm going to go. I want to be live because I'm a PE coach. It's a little bit different. But for the core teachers that have to teach and instruct and show notes or whatever it might be, show procedures, what is a virtual learning classroom going to look like for them?
Exactly. So it's going to be we're going to rely heavily on technology. We want to make sure that all teachers have available webcams, speakers, stable internet, which in some older facilities may be difficult to attain. But some school districts working hard and putting money into technology infrastructure to ensure that it's very stable. Some teachers, depending on where they go to school, depending on what decisions their leaders have made, will have to record their instruction as they're instructing live, and then make sure that plays for students at home. So it's almost having like, hey, you hold my camera, and I'm going to teach this particular subject or this particular lesson in front of a live audience or a live classroom, while there's other people tuning in or streaming my feed. That's one model that some people have explored. We don't know how well it's going to work. One of the biggest issues I think that we're encountering is how do we decide who gets to come and get in live instruction versus who gets to stay home. And so those conversations are currently happening. We always say to ourselves, well, we want the kids who struggle the most to be live instruction. However, those are also some of the kids who don't come to school regularly,
Right.
throughout a normal year. And so then we struggle, we have that struggle. And then the conversation starts to bleed into like your philosophy of education and the data, how minority students are usually affected, or minority students don't benefit from the educational system as other students. And doing this, forcing kids to come in when, well, I can't, hey, you know what? COVID hit, we don't have jobs. My parents got laid off. I got to go to work. I'll see you online when I get home from work. I mean, so there are so many potential factors that we're still trying to get ahead of. Once we begin, we're going to have a better idea of what's affecting our kids, and then we reshift our thinking. And that's going to be our goal, reshift our thinking, so that way we can start finding out why is Juanito or Jamal or Maria not showing up, even though they were A students before. Why are they not showing up to virtual learning? So all those conversations are being had, and a lot of these conversations are overlapping. There is no one solution yet. We're still acquiring data, and then we will have to shift our mindset once that data starts rolling in.
I think from a big frustration that teachers had was the fact that students weren't coming on. What it will be in place, or who should be held accountable, or what happens when we get, let's say 20%. Let's just throw a number out there. 20 to 25% of the student population does not participate in live going to school or virtual learning. They're enrolled, but they don't show up a day to school for, let's say 30, 40. How can you, what does the conversation look like when that situation arises?
So the main conversation is understanding the reason why. Just throwing a blanket statement out there, 25% of the kids or 30% of the kids will not show up. We have to identify the reasons behind it. Again, we go back to, is it because they have a technology issue? They don't have technology in their homes. Is it because they have to work? Is it because they don't have parents? Is it because they share technology with other siblings as well. So what is the reason that these 5 kids are not showing up to class? And then from there, we start to come up with solutions. Well, Juanito doesn't have internet. You know what? We have funds, federal funds, whatever the case may be. We're gonna get Juanito a hotspot. Well, Juanito and Maria doesn't have a laptop. We'll get Maria a laptop. Mario has to work during the day. We're going to record all the instructions so that way he can view at night. So this is what we have to do. We have to find out why these kids are not showing up and then start coming up with solutions. Yes, from the very beginning, everyone's saying, well, it's the kid's fault, it's the family's fault. They need to be able to, people are ready to blame the kid, ready to blame the family. And, I completely understand that argument. However, if we want people to no longer be marginalized, we have to, those of us who are educated, those of us who are educators, we have to come up with those solutions, because people who have been traditionally marginalized for generations may not know how to access education. So it's going to be important for us to help create those bridges. Understanding why they cannot access technology, or understanding why they don't log on is easier for us to kind of sort of shorten those gaps or lessen those gaps, because these kids are going to be parents in the future, and we want them to be able to have the knowledge, so that way their kids can have access as well. So just stopping short at saying, well, that's the family.
Right. I get, no, you're fine. You're doing great. But let me chime in here with Val Selena Benoit's comment. Great friends from the area. We went to school together. I played with Val. I coached with him. What a great coach. I love coaching with that guy, listening to him be a quarterback coach. A big fan of Val Benoit. But he mentions here his teaching experience went from 8 to 9 p.m., 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. And I'm sure a lot of teachers, we were on the same boat where our work day was very long. And of course, when I mentioned teachers shouldn't get paid as much, it's not because the workload for a teacher is not the same or drastically more. We all know that whoever's in the education system knows that the workload was heavy. My thing is how effective, even though the workload was heavy for us, what was the effect? The reason I mentioned the whole cutting is the effectiveness of the students learning. Because of the things we're talking about right now, some weren't getting online by choice. Some weren't getting online because they couldn't. Maybe whatever factors was. I just wanted to clarify that we understand. I think all educators understand that the workload was heavy, and I think this goes out to parents who are not educators, and even some parents that are educators. And I'm guilty of that with my daughter in first grade. She didn't turn in half the assignments either because I was busy cooking, going outside, playing with them. Trying to teach, put in things, look at Google Classroom assignments, all these things. It was a very tough workload. And I can only imagine for the teachers that did summer school, which were teaching on site, were there with kids. I mean, the workload for a teacher is heavy. So we have to understand that as lawmakers, policy TA, school boards, principals, we know it's a heavy workload. But at the same time, the end user is the student. How effective were we being there? So we have to understand that. So I think we're good with that. The virtual learning, I think every school district in the same boat, from cameras, going live, saving it. It's going to be, I think what I'm listening to a lot is the teachers are going to put in the work. We're going to put in the work. Mm-hmm. We're going to do whatever it takes to make sure we get all the information to produce education for students. Would you agree with that statement?
Well, and I think I need you to clarify. So you're saying that the value of a teacher's paycheck is based on what a kid learns rather than the effort that they put forth in the teaching, right? Is that what you're saying? No,
it's just the comment is just so we can all understand that we all are in agreement that the workload for teachers was heavy, no doubt. Mm-hmm. I think what I'm alluding to is parents. We need to ask for parents as a favor. We need their help. We need their help in the sense that for the 33%, 40%, 50% of the students that did not turn in the work, did not log in, we need to make sure that we say, hey, you know what? We're doing our part. The students need to do their part too. And at the state of Texas, TEA, every school district, I believe it's gonna happen where students are just not gonna do the work. They're not gonna, for the ones that stay home. Oh, I'm gonna do virtual learning, and then all of a sudden, what? Not even virtual. They're not even gonna turn to work. So it's one thing that we have to take into consideration. Will it happen or not? Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the message needs to be sent out there to where what's parents or something needs to be held accountable, or we need to make strict policies or
Yeah.
something to where there's kids that are just not going to do the work.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you at all. I absolutely believe that in order for a kid to benefit from a school, the community itself has to get involved, and that just doesn't mean your parents. It means also your business owners. It also means the governing bodies of your municipalities or whatever the case may be. So yes, it's gonna take a community to be able to make sure that these kids get the education that they deserve. And so we don't want to just go ahead and single out one stakeholder when it comes to this. We want to be able to hold everybody accountable. So yes, we want parents to be involved, and we want to be able to hold parents accountable, but it goes beyond that. Now understand, like I mentioned earlier, there are generations of people who have been marginalized where education is not as valued. And so we want to be able to come in and intervene and say that yes, education is valuable. And that's why it's important that we don't just hold that one stakeholder, that one, parents,
Right.
I mean, yes, we're going to hold them accountable, but it has to go beyond just the parents. It has to be the neighbors and the churches and the businesses and the city governors or the city government, city government, all that has to be involved. It takes time to build these relationships, right?
Yeah, of course,
Some
of
of
course.
us, La Jolla ISD, as always, for me, at least back when I was there, has always had this really close community ties, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So exactly. So that is what everybody across the state, across the nation, has to be able to aspire to accomplish, is to get the entire community involved. And with virtual learning, I think it's going to be even more important, that we, hey, you're a kid, what are you doing, up at 2 o'clock in the morning? Don't come to my business, whatever, like I don't have a solution to that. I don't know how everyone's going to be able to partake in this, but I mean, it gets to the point where like we're trying to tell our businesses right across the street, do not sell Cokes in the morning to our kids, right? Because that makes it tougher for us to operate as a campus. I mean, stuff like that. Like, don't sell them breakfast tacos because then they're late.
Right.
So that kind of interaction. But we all have to be willing to work together, and that's very hard because everyone wants a piece of the pie, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wants their own piece. And we want to be able to just do it together.
Let's touch base on now. Let's talk about this. We're still on virtual learning. Let's touch base on the parenting as the educator at the same time. And I think we got to make sure we take those people into consideration. I know one of my colleagues posted in one of the threads that I had meant on my comment was, try to be a parent and a teacher at the same time from home, which we kind of experienced over the course of the late spring. And of course, Roger mentions that I'm speaking as a parent, not as a district's employee. I guess he didn't struggle with PE coaching during April, May of 2020, which is a very good point Roger makes. I'm going to touch on this really quick, and then we're going to continue with Nelia Garcia's comment. And it deals with parenting and teaching from home. But first, let's touch about there's something that I want to talk about with Roger's statement. Is for those sports people out there, the coaches, and we're going to get to the sports, towards later in this interview, and the discussion is what about the coaches, the after school coaches, especially baseball. Baseball took a big. They didn't have a season, right? They were barely going to start. Maybe they had some preseason, but I don't know. I know in our district and most of the area, they got their full stipend. Did most baseball coaches in your area get the full stipend?
Yes.
Right.
Because they're on contract. Yeah.
They're on contract. Right, but they didn't work. They didn't do their job. Granted, I understand special circumstances, COVID, whatever. Junior high coaches. There was two other spring sports that they didn't get to coach, and we got paid. Which is, COVID happened. It's a very special situation. Now coming up, there's football, and other things and the days, but we're going to talk about that later. Should we get paid for that kind of stuff? But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, watch this. Nelia, your child didn't turn in the work. You said it. I said it. Rudy Mendez said it. You said it. And it's okay. I have one that doesn't. I think as educators, that kind of got complicated or frustrating where it's we have to do our job as teachers and all these, the stress and the nuances of this being new territory. And now you got to make sure our kids turn in work and help them, because I think there was a lot of parent teaching or parent helping at home. So that's another thing. I guess the point I'm making is teachers are going to have a very heavy workload, both work and parenting, with the kids that stay home, and that's going to get tough. So maybe I was totally wrong. Maybe we should get paid more, depending on the situation. But I think parents do have it tough. Teacher parents, it's going to be hard for them. The uncharted waters. Now let's talk about. I think we're done with that one. Of course, people are more than welcome to comment. Let's talk about opening the schools. What date? What does it look like over there on you guys opening the schools?
We are still opening August 10th. Teachers will be returning August 3rd. We are going to try to keep everything at 25% capacity.
Oh, really? So not everybody gets to come. You're going to stay at starting school only 25%. Oh, wow. That's the first time I hear something like that. Okay.
And do not get me wrong. It's 25% at a time. It's 25% of the student population at a time, which means, like I said, we talked about those models that I mentioned earlier. There are some kids who are going to be 100% virtual. They're not going to come to school at all, right? They stay at home and they receive their instruction at home. We have multiple schedules coming in where it's like at 10 o'clock, or whatever, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Some kids leave at 12 o'clock completely. A new set of kids comes in at 12:30. All those is for us to schedule only 25 kids at a time. And of course, we're going to have kids who are going to do, they have a class, they have a live class, an in-person class at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and then their next live class isn't until 3 o'clock. So then they have to go home between those hours. You see what I mean? And as buses are dropping off kids, they're picking up kids. The system hasn't been perfected. We know that there's going to be major flaws. We know that there's going to be confusion. So we're going to try everything in our power to make sure that we get information out. Our district does an excellent job of communicating. I mean, we email and we send off messages and we're on social media. And so our district is trying its best to make sure that they get as much information out as possible to the parents. And so that's kind of sort of where we are right now. Conversations still continuing. We don't have a solution yet, but our goal is to have 25% of students on campus at a time only. We're going to have A-Day, B-Days, where only some kids come in on Mondays, Wednesdays. Other kids only come on Tuesdays, Thursdays. So
kind of like the college model, I guess you're saying.
Exactly. So exactly. So again, we haven't perfected it. We understand that we're humans. We understand that there's going to be confusion. We understand that Juanito is going to come in on Monday, and then he's not supposed to come on. He's not supposed to come on Tuesday, but he shows up. What do we do with Juanito, who's not supposed to be on campus on Tuesday? We understand that we're going to have those issues, and we're going to try to have a solution for them before the year begins. So yes, we don't have everything down perfectly, structured, but we are working on it based on data that we received, surveys that we've sent out, how teachers feel about the whole situation. And then, of course, aside from that, we're also limiting the amount of kids in a classroom. Our district has already measured every single classroom in the district, and they've given their recommendation on each classroom. So they'll be like, classroom 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, recommendation is 15. Classroom 8, 9, 10, 11, they're bigger, our recommendation is 18. And so all that data is coming in from the district offices. And so it gives us a game plan of how to structure the kids. We are recommending that every single kid is going to be, we're going to have a crew of teachers with thermometers, or, as they come through the door, try to get as many kids as possible, get a reading. We're going to have masks for the kids who don't have masks. Make sure each kid has a mask and each kid wears a mask. Kids who refuse to wear a mask, then you're not permitted to be at school. You're jeopardizing the safety of the rest of the campus. So that's why we urge the parents to encourage their kids, just wear your mask. Don't make it a big deal. It's like dress code, you know?
Yeah, just wear your
And
mask.
so we have all, exactly. So we have all these conversations that are happening, all these plans that we're trying to create, and all these structures that we're trying to develop to make sure that we have a very safe opening come August 10th.
Let me ask you this. So, for example, we open this campus and you're 25%. What does a day look
Mm-hmm.
like in instruction, the conference period, the elective period, the lunch periods?
Mm-hmm.
Today, I was discussing with somebody how, wait a minute, if we're going to go out back to school, how do you keep the, for example, you're at 25%. That's the first time I hear an idea like that. Maybe what about the schools that aren't like that? How do you keep the distance learning? Of course, I'm assuming that everybody right now knows wear your mask. Everybody needs to wear the mask. I think we're all in agreement with that. It's more of the distance learning, 6 feet apart, in the lunch, in the cafeteria. That's kind of hard. In the PE, the bands, the folklorico, fine arts departments, all those things. Can you give us a rundown of what you guys see or are adjusting in those kind of situations?
So one of the things, the biggest thing for us was lunches because that's
Yeah.
a huge number of students in one specific place. So one of the recommendations that was made was to have lunch in the classroom where they're actually delivered. And we were under construction. My specific campus was under construction this year. And so we had to transfer food from a different campus. So we're going to use that same model and, shrink it down to size and have all these traveling carts from classroom to classroom. And that's going to be one of the recommendations for solving the issue with the lunchroom. And that's going to be breakfast and lunch. And if we extend the day, which is another model that was being toyed with, if we extend the day to 6 o'clock as opposed to ending at 4, if we extend the day, then we'll also provide what they call dinner, which is another round of food for the students who, if we decide to employ that specific model that requires teachers to be there till 6, or to have education still happening till 6, or instruction happening till 6, that we also have another round of food, and that includes dinner, so to speak. So yeah, like I said, so many different options, so many models being discussed. We don't have a solution yet.
Two things that you mentioned was one, eating in the classroom, which I discussed with a colleague of mine earlier today, and two, extending the day till 6.
Mm-hmm.
Extending the day till 6, that means we're talking about asking teachers to have a longer school day. Is that correct? Was that fair to say?
That is correct. However, Fridays will be off, so it'll be like a 3-day weekend.
Oh, like a first.
So they
Okay.
will work extra.
Oh, so you're going. If
So
you
they will
follow
work
that
like,
model, you're going true Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday.
exactly. Now that's just one of the models that's being discussed.
Right.
It's not the model.
Right.
We haven't finalized the model that we're going to be utilizing, but that's one
Right.
of the
So
one of the
it's a model.
recommendations that came up in our conversations. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let me ask you this. This is the other one that was mentioned with one of my conversations was lunch in the classroom. Who monitors it? How is it going to be for teachers to take a break? Is it the teacher, the classroom teacher, or how does that? What is that looking? Because what we saw is like, well, the teacher has to monitor that conference, uh, lunch. What are we looking at for teachers in that sense?
So that was the big question was, will our unions allow some sort of sort of a pass when it comes to that, because it's technically supposed to be 30-minute duty-free lunch, right? And so that's one of the reasons why it's still just an option. We're considering utilizing perhaps other staff, but of course that puts us more at risk because we have somebody coming in from the outside. We talked about staggering the lunches, where it's like this hallway we'll eat lunch from 11:30 to 12. Utilize aides, teacher aides to come in, monitor the kids in the classroom during that time. Then the next hallway goes from 12 to 12:30, so on and so forth. Staggering the lunches so we can utilize our aides to cover was an option that was discussed. And some people said, hey, if a teacher is willing to just take their 30 free, kind of sort of just eat with their kids, then that would be okay. However, we're still discussing it, but that was one of the options when it comes to lunches.
Yeah, because we thought about it. We were troubleshooting that in a conversation over the phone, and my buddy goes, well, we said, well, why don't we get elected teachers to cover? This is a junior high setting that I'm talking about. Is why don't we just get the elective teachers to cover the way they do a lunch period in the cafeteria? I was like, there's not enough elective teachers to cover each single classroom, right? Or maybe there. I mean, I don't know. And
Exactly.
that's a great point you bring up. In just a hallway, everybody's 6 feet apart in the hallway, and one person monitors everything, or 2 to 3 people. You don't need as many people in that model that you're talking about. That's a great point right there. How do we deal with
It really does depend on how the model is executed.
right the procedures? And you're right, absolutely.
Mhm.
What is it looking like for elective teachers in your school district? Of, for example, PE, the dance, the fine arts. That, for example, a band director. Well, he needs his band so he can hear the sound. Um, and the coaching aspect is, well, for example, in the athletic periods, well, I have to work them out. The locker room, 6 feet apart, all these things, wear the mask, change. What are we looking at? What kind of things do you guys at administrators in San Antonio are talking about there?
All right, so Rudy, you're gonna have to excuse me, but the last thing I heard you say was what's gonna happen to the band.
Right.
Can you repeat what you
So
just said?
no worries. Yeah, that's cool. Is what happens? What kind of conversations are you having? For example, in the sense of the athletic period, where there's a lot of congestion, the band,
Mhm.
the dance classes, the choir, the orchestra, things of that nature. What kind of guidelines and adjustments are we making? Are you guys thinking about there?
Same thing, keeping them apart, only allowing a certain amount of kids in the classroom or in the space permitted. I don't know how big our gym is, but we're only going to permit for example, a PE course or an athletic course. If the facility is only so big, it only holds so many number of kids. We're going to go ahead and stick to that when it comes to our master schedule. Same thing with the dance classes. The studio is only so big; it will only hold 14 kids or 16 kids or 18 kids at a time. We're only going to schedule 18 kids in that classroom because that's the recommendation that the district came based on the size of the facility. It will be up to the teacher to decide how she just spreads them around and how the furniture spread around. We're going to encourage teachers to minimize excess furniture. So if you have a bookshelf, teachers have like a ton of bookshelves, take them home, leave them at home until COVID kind of sort of starts to dissipate. But for right now, we're going to try to maximize and optimize the space of the classrooms for student learning and for distance, maintaining distance. So yeah, just like we do with regular classrooms, we're going to do the same thing with the electives. Now, when it comes to band, we have marching, all that. Again, we're going to have to continue exploring our options. We're going to get input from the band directors. Unfortunately, some of these programs will suffer. You're not going to see the glitz and the glamour that you're used to seeing from some of these performing arts. But we still want to be able to train these kids. We still want to be able to teach them how to play the flute. However, the marching may not be as great as it used to be. And unfortunately, that's kind of sort of where we are right now. We have always included fine arts people in our conversations, right? How can we make this better? These are the rules. How can we still make sure that our kids are learning what they need to learn? And it's frustrating because we have so many fine arts teachers they're about the show. It's about the show. And if these kids cannot be this close to each other, then the show's not going to work. We get that. So we're going to have to suspend shows until further
So
notice.
would it be a
Yeah.
fair? Is I think with that comment being said, I think it's a fair statement for elective teachers. Or would you think the first statement is come in knowing that we're not gonna that it's gonna suffer. Our programs are gonna suffer, and that's a hit we have to take as elective teachers from sports to fine arts because of the situation we're in.
Yeah, and I think that's across the board because it's not just electives; it's even teachers. I am an English teacher, and I understand that the way my classroom operates will differ from previous years. I will not yield the same results I once or that I'm used to that I once did, just because the platforms are different, the way we operate are different. So we as teachers have to also understand that that is a possibility that we will not yield, we won't reap what we used to reap because we're operating differently on different platforms. You know,
So
we're
with that,
facilitating the
yeah,
instruction
yeah,
differently.
the outcomes, the productivity is not going to be the same. The outcomes of productivity is not going to be the same. With
At
that
least
being
that
said,
is that is, but that is what how we're perceiving it because
right, right.
taking exactly. We're taking the
The
data, we're taking the way we used to do things, we're taking thoughts, we're taking discussions that have already happened. So we're bracing ourselves uh, with the understanding that we're not going to yield the results that we used to.
and it just might.
We
It just
understand that.
might. It might be great. We don't know. But from
Yeah,
from
exactly.
from
It may be
analysis,
better. It may be
it,
better.
it
Yeah,
may be better. But the analysis and the
it may be better.
experience says otherwise, right? So my thing. So it leads to my
Hmm.
next question is: with that being said, what is the word on STAR testing, and what kind of expectations
Um,
is the state expecting there?
so the only thing I'm aware of now, understand that. Well, the only thing I know is that testing will commence come the spring semester, right? We're still going to have testing. Actually, those of us who don't do well have to test mid year. So testing will still happen. Are you there,
Really?
Rudy?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Loud and
Can you
clear.
hear me?
Yes,
You're
sir.
you're breaking up. You're clear. Okay, good.
Mm.
So yes, we're still going to test. That's coming down from the commissioner of TEA. Now understand that when it comes to public schools, TEA is its governing body. So the way in Texas, the way a school operates is based on policy made at TEA. That's just kind of sort of the way it is, right? Last thing I heard was that we're still going to do testing. Now, how they plan to measure is unknown. Are they going to keep the same standards? Will the standards be dropped a few points? We don't know yet. We don't know how they're going to measure the results, um, just because it's COVID.
That's going to be very interesting, especially if
Yeah,
kids understand that they kind of have a freebie, and it's not going to be taken as serious. You know, some students don't even
yeah,
take it serious in the first
so
place.
yeah, exactly. So um, this may be their attempt to normalize everything, or at least to return to normal, some form of normalcy, right? Um, Having if we tell the schools that we're going to still hold them accountable, that we're still going to have accountability in place, that it's going to help districts find ways to return back to normal, to have some sense of normalcy. Again, the way they measure STAR testing is we still don't know. We don't know they're going to have the same measures in place. We don't know. All we know is that kids will be taking a test. We don't
Right.
know how they're going to rate it, how they're going to weigh it. We don't know yet. But if TEA tells you, hey, buddy, we're still going to hold you accountable, districts are going to try their best to funnel the resources to ensuring that all these kids get the education that they need. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah, those are very interesting things that we have to consider as educators and as parents and administrators and leaders of the decision making. There's something very interesting is one thing that we haven't talked about is how much of an impact is COVID having in your area in San Antonio?
Well, San Antonio is, I guess you could say, a hotspot. Um, and so we have a large number of cases in our city. Um,
Students? How many students?
so
Any
yeah.
students?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I don't have access to that data. I only know of the numbers
Hmm.
the county puts out, and I don't know which one of those are students or which one of those are staff. Uh, One of the things that our district is trying to do is do contact tracing. I know that we had one of our an employee was affected, and so they try to contact as many people as they can who they came across, and so they're doing a pretty good job. The district is with contact tracing, so that way, hey, if you potentially came across a person who tested positive, we have to at least let you know, so that way you can go and get tested yourself. So,
Let me ask you this.
um,
The reason I'm asking about COVID and how much of an impact it's having in your area, and I think right now most big cities, Texas and COVID we're at capacity. I know here in the valley, I know
mhm,
my wife, we've been at your house, Elena, and we graduated together. She works at the hospital at ICU and all these things, and it's bad, and a lot of people don't understand that.
mhm,
And I need to get her on
yeah.
this live, even if it's just your voice. But I think we're in consensus, we're on the same boat. The reason I mentioned that, I wanted to touch base with you on that is what how was the I know we're in Texas, and in Texas football is king, I would say. It's a major part of our culture, Texas football. I know in this area there was strength and conditioning training by some districts. I know I live near Mission Veterans, and in the mornings when I was taking my own kids for my training, I would see them train, and I think they're going to start in a week or so. I think I heard. What kind of how is that going on over there in your area with strength and conditioning training?
Same thing. Our coaches, from what they've told us, is that they've kept the kids away from each other, and it's very difficult. And they have rotation. So gym time, for example, like lifting weights, only a certain number of kids in the weight room at a time. You know, like they're trying their best to keep them completely separate. It's been hard for them as well because they don't get in a day what they would normally get. You know, like
Right.
we were able to do all this in one day. They can't do that because they have to rotate the kids in and out. So while some of the kids are lifting weights, other kids are running, you know, and only a certain number of
Right.
kids at the track, and you know, only certain kids in the gym, you know, and so they've tried their best to stagger their workouts. They have multiple coaches, luckily, and so they've all met. They've all kind of sort of worked out a plan, and that's last I heard. That's what they've been trying to do is to distance the kids from each other. Some of them are requiring that they still wear face masks. It's very hard because the kids are breathing. And so, but it's
Right.
always like take a break, take off your mask for a couple minutes or a couple seconds, put back on, you know, like minimize the length of exposure, so to speak. So,
So as of right now, I mean, I really haven't talked to any of my coaches or my upper. I haven't gotten word, but I mean, I'm a junior high coach, a little bit different. What is the word on football? Are we? Or is it? Are you guys in San Antonio? Is it you? I mean, I don't know how much contact you have with your coaches. Are you guys starting? Is football going to start the same
um,
regular?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Last I heard, a schedule was already developed. I don't know if, for posterity's sake, they're still going to hold these tournaments, but with no audiences, where it's only, you know, just so that way there's still that sense of like interscholastic competition, you know,
Right.
where, I mean, I'm sorry you can't come see the game, but we're going to still hold a game. And that minimizes the exposure for the players, the parents, the fans. There will be no fans, there will be no parents, there'll be only coaches, reps, and players. And then that, I mean, they'll still move forward, playing each other and holding these games, but there will be no fans. That was a potential solution. We were hoping that by the time football season started, that COVID would have either disappeared or at least minimized. That didn't happen, so we may have to look at those options that we were considering a very long time ago.
We
So
earlier
that's
today,
a possibility.
one of my buddies is something that I wanted to talk about when it comes to kids. I know some of the stuff. It seems like we're leaning a little bit more towards high school, junior high, but according to your data or the data that has been presented to you guys, what does the elementary look like? What kind of risk factor and the data showing there for those type of young kids, pre-teenagers, in the COVID sense?
Yeah, yeah. I've seen a number of numbers that have come through. The one that worries me the most is that they're estimating about 0.02% of our students to die from COVID because of exposure at schools. Some people are saying that that's a very conservative number, but that equates to about 15,000 students on average, you know, and so that's concerning. So that's why we're always trying to minimize. We're trying to minimize the exposure, which is why we're trying to have all these models. Which is why people are saying, let's not open up the schools at all. Let's just have some form of platform, some form of online platform, virtual platform. So everyone has opinions about what should happen just because all these numbers are coming in, right? Because those are just students. Now remember, if any of those 15,000 students that could potentially die because of the infection that they got at school, now remember they're going to take it home to their parents, who then take it to their grandparents and to their neighbors. And so even though, yes, people think, well, think about it, 0.02% is not that big, but that's just talking about students only. We're not talking about how that can grow beyond just the data that concerns students. And
Right,
so
right.
it's just a little nerve-wracking for a lot of people, and it's very it's concerning us as administrators. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep as many people safe as possible. So we're trying to implement all these practices, all these policies, check temperature when they come into the room, make sure everyone has a mask. Every time you walk into a classroom, there's a huge bottle of sanitizer. Make sure you do, every time class ends, we're going to wipe every single table down. So we're trying to develop all these practices and processes so that way we can maintain a very safe environment at school.
The reason it's one thing that I mentioned a few times in some of my shows is what happened. We revisit COVID, and we were. I think we had a false sense of security when before Texas opened. Was people were quarantined, so the data didn't show that COVID was a big deal, and people got a little frustrated. We got a false sense of security. Memorial Day happened. Texas opens up. People remove their masks. Fast forward 3 weeks later, hospitals are at capacity. 4th of July happened.
Mm-hmm.
In 2 to 3 weeks, hospitals will still be at capacity. The reason I bring that up and the false sense of security is I think right now, I mean, me as a parent and me when I do go out and about, I don't see that many kids out and about. So I think right now the data is not showing the numbers for kids because the kids aren't around other kids. So we might see that data change once school starts and they all start interacting with each other. Well, what is the view like in San Antonio? What are you seeing? Are kids out and about? Or do you think that most of the parents are doing a good job of keeping their young kids at home?
Well, that's very hard to answer. I mean, I only heard part of your question because our internet seems to be a little unstable. But I guess your question is, are our parents going to try to keep as many kids safe as possible with masks? Is that what you're asking?
No, it's the the data doesn't show kids being affected by COVID. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm pushing or I'm making a point that that data doesn't show it because the kids are quarantined. I think most parents
Mm-hmm.
are keeping their kids at home. How does it look over there in San Antonio
Mm-hmm.
with kids going out and about?
Well, you see, numbers are very hard because data is not all encompassing. Some of the data sets that we get are partial data sets. And so people will say, well, there's only a certain amount of people, who have COVID. But the reason that number exists is because testing wasn't done for the rest of the population. So you don't have a clear idea of the way that works. Some of the numbers can be very misleading when you don't read the fine print. Yes, a lot of parents are keeping their kids at home, but not all parents, because unfortunately, there's been this political polarization when it comes to COVID and its effects and whether it exists or not. And so, in a city as diverse as San Antonio, you have some people who believe, yes, there's a huge pandemic that we need to worry about, and will keep their kids quarantined. And then they have a set of people who don't believe. And so it's very difficult to make one point knowing that everyone behaves differently. Yes, some people will keep their kids at home and some won't. So it's very difficult for me to tell you exactly what's happening in San Antonio because it's so large and so diverse. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know at this household, at the Mendez household, at Mendezville, the city of Mendezville here is, we have a split household. I think I'm a believer in my wife wants to keep the kids here and no school. And I say, no, it's okay. They'll be fine. Just worry about their immune system. They should be good. But of course, everybody has
Yeah.
different points of views, different opinions, different worries, and that's normal. So,
Yeah.
Jake, I think that wraps it up for us. I think hopefully people tuned in. The main goal was for
Okay.
people to share ideas on opening and for school board members to hear something different from the area, from you being in San Antonio. And hopefully they tuned in. I thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it, man.
No problem, man. Anytime.
All right. Have a
Take
good
care,
night.
man.
Yeah. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That was Jake Solis, good friend of mine from San Antonio, Texas. He graduated with us from La Jolla. So I said, why not bring a friendly face or a familiar face to some of you that might know him? That he the type of stuff that they're talking about over there. Not to say that it's better or worse. It's just a different point of view. We're trying to get as many points of views as possible. I do apologize for most of the teachers and educators that I struck a nerve with my comment on Facebook that teachers and their salary being lowered. I understand it's a big workload. It's hectic. The work day, there are going to be longer work days. We have to answer emails, whatever, Google Classroom, whatever it might be. Teacher, we're in uncharted waters, and the workload is going to be big. And I think we have to be ready. It's a lot of factors, very individualistic factors from an employee standpoint, a parent standpoint, doing both. Some people going to work, not going to work. Some people not working. It's it's tough times, new times, and we'll see. Personally, on a very personal note, I don't think we're ready. But then again, the doctors and some of the stats show that the kids will be fine. And then you talk about teachers. Okay, what if the teachers are at higher risk than the students? And that's interesting. Now, one thing I do want to mention is this: the flu. The flu is deadly. The flu is deadly, and yet we don't close the schools down. That's one point of view. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying some maybe some of the TA and the governor Abbott and stuff like that is saying, I mean, we already have a deadly virus. Now we just have another one. What's going to be interesting is that when we do go to school is when the two viruses are here at the same time. That's going to be chaotic, I think. I know most of us coaches. I know I was talking to my brother. We see kids that we lose athletes to sickness, and they're out for a week or two. So we'll see. It's uncharted waters. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope there were some good points. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in, and we shall see you next time. Thank you so much. You guys be easy and enjoy the rest of your summer. Be safe. Wear your masks. Peace.